Good morning, children of the internet. I hope you are doing well. Today's review is of All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a hefty World War II novel that I have been meaning to read since I saw 6 different people reading it near me all summer, and I finally picked it up and it was fantastic. It lived up to every exclamation that I had heard about it, and I want to tell you what I thought. If you're not familiar, this book follows 2 really main characters, 2 young children named Werner and one named Marie-Laure, through their respective lives from a very, very young age as children until a little bit past the war has ended. They lead very, very different lives. Werner is from Germany, and he winds up joining this school where very, very talented young boys go to become part of the Hitler Youth. And Marie-Laure is living with her father in Paris. He is the locksmith for a museum there, and so she follows him every day and has to go through life with the invisible world around her because she, at the age of 6, becomes blind. Both of them come from strikingly different situations. Marie-Laure is blind and French, and Werner is an orphan living with his sister in a children's house in Germany. So Werner is very talented with radios and electricity and figuring out scientific things like that. He has a lot of questions about the way the world works, and he and his sister secretly listen to the radio in the attic of the children's house every night to hear these programs broadcast from France by a Frenchman who talks about science and how the earth rotates around the sun and how plants eventually turn into coal and all of that. Marie-Laure spends her life reading everything she can from these giant braille compendiums that her father buys for her in each of her birthday, and so her life not being able to see anything is supplemented by her reading these wondrous tales, most notably 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which keeps her occupied and at least seeing inside her own mind. So then the occupation of France comes, and Marie-Laure and her father are forced to flee to a small seaside village called Saint-Malo, which is where her great-uncle Etienne lives. So they stay with him for a while, and because he lost his brother in the previous war when they were both fighting, he's become something of a recluse, doesn't really like to go outside, doesn't want to see anybody, and almost leaving his room every day reminds him of the fact that he is now alone and still alive while his brother is not. So it's a grim situation for our 2 Parisians, and also a grim situation as Werner goes off to this school because he is very talented, but it's a lot more rigorous than he is anticipating, and they're asking him to do everything in the name of Hitler and for the strength of Germany, and it's not what is in line with Werner's value system, and he's being asked to do a lot of things that he does not agree with, and watching almost the torture through the lessons that they're teaching the children of his friend Frederick, and writing to his sister Jutta, who is still in the children's house in Zollverein in Germany, and telling her, I don't know how to feel about what I'm doing because I don't agree, but this is the only way that I can continue to move forward, because if I were to come home, I would have to work in the mines at the age of 15, and that is how their father died, and he's trying to escape that same fate. Eventually, the war does arrive, and Werner is sent to the front lines to help track people with radio frequencies, and Marie-Laure is still at this old house trying to befriend her great uncle and helping him to see that the world is not quite so scary. And you're waiting and waiting and waiting as this book goes along. It's incredibly well written, and you're just wondering, when are the 2 stories going to converge? And I think that is something that drives the book, because it happens almost later in the story than you would want or anticipate. I think it happened perfectly. I think if it had happened any earlier, it would not have been as compelling in the past 150, 200 pages. While I was reading that section, I was pacing. I was standing up and just walking back and forth because I wasn't sure what was going to happen and who was going to make it, and if the 2 characters were ever going to find one another. This book is driven not only by a plot that is facilitated in jumps in time between all 7 sections. We start at the beginning of these children's lives and then move very quickly to some time in the distant future, and then back and forth and back and forth. And for a while it was very frustrating. I didn't understand why this was necessary, why we couldn't have just told this in a linear fashion. But the end really makes it clear why that distinction between the time periods needs to jump around like that. Additionally, I've seen a lot of criticism in positive reviews of this book of the very short chapters. Some are 2 pages, some are 4 pages, some have more length than that. I think that those tiny little thoughts that only take up a paragraph or 2 are incredibly important in a book that is told this way. I think without those intermittent little sparks of idea for the different characters that are played out, it's necessary to see them all to get the full perspective and the gravity of what is going on from everyone's point of view. The 2 main characters in this book are by far the standouts, and we read from their perspective most often, but there are other characters that I really, really enjoyed. Marie-Laure's uncle, her great uncle Etienne, goes through a lot of sort of self-actualization, and he comes into a new point of his being, as it were, and he just is someone who I depended on to sort of maintain as a constant throughout the story as he was changing and everyone was changing. Also Jetta, which is Werner's younger sister. She's still back in Germany. I longed a lot of the time to hear more about her and what was happening with her, and we only really get that in the beginning and the end of the book. Most of that is because of the way that the plot is set up and what's happening in the plot that we don't get to hear a lot about her. If you've read the book, you know what I mean. But she is someone who I felt was really important to me since she was Werner's only family at the time, and I really wanted to make sure that whatever was happening with anybody else, that she was okay. I also really enjoyed one of the older students at Werner's school. His name is Frank Volkheimer. He winds up being really, really important toward the end, and he is just somebody who has his heart in the right place and does what he is told, and no matter what, he has always wound up doing the right thing, no matter how brutal that right thing may seem. So this book, as I mentioned, is beautifully composed. Those chapters I felt were really necessary at the lengths that they were written. Just the way that this pulls you along and weaves the 2 or 3 or 4 or eventually 5 stories together is just so beautifully done. I think, how many times can I use the word beautiful to describe this book? It is the winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2015, if that tells you anything. What I wasn't sure about with this was how far the stories carried into the future. So you get to the end and you hear a little bit about what happens after the war and who is still around to tell their story and let you kind of piece together where everybody wound up. And I enjoyed that ending, like that concrete, solid ending of knowing what happens. It didn't leave it to the reader's imagination to sort of make up everybody's own lives, but it just felt a little bit too far. Like I didn't want to know quite that much. I can't really put my finger on why that sat not so well with me, but I guess I would have liked it to end a little bit closer to the war. Overall, 5 out of 5 stars for All the Light We Cannot See. Definitely one of my favorite books I have read in 2016. If you have read it as well and enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to chat about it. Conversely, if you did not enjoy this book or quit halfway through or anything like that, I would also like to hear about that, because I've read a number of Goodreads reviews where people have done that because they could not get into either the chapter style or just the flow or how it jumped around back and forth a lot. I'm really interested in that as well. So if you're one of those people, please let me know. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives, and we'll see you very soon.